Hello everyone, and welcome. I'm Kai, and in this entry in the Quran in Context series, we further continue examining the Quranic reference to the Ark of the Covenant. In this installment, our focus is specifically on the Quranic mention that the Ark of the Covenant is a sign of Saul's kingship. The Quranic verse referring to the Ark of the Covenant is Surah 2, verse 248, in connection to the biblical Saul going to war with the enemies of Israel. Quote, "And the prophet said to them, Indeed, a sign of his kingship is that the chest will come to you, in which is assurance from your Lord and a remnant of what the family of Moses and the family of Aaron had left, carried by the angels. Indeed, in that is a sign for you, if you are believers." End quote. The biblical narrative can be found in the book of 1 Samuel. The Quran makes a blunder here. To see it, we first need to also look at the previous two verses, namely verses 246 and 247. The Quranic narrative is then as follows. Quote, "Have you not considered the assembly of the children of Israel after the time of Moses, when they said to a prophet of theirs, 'Send to us a king, and we will fight in the way of Allah'? He said, 'Would you perhaps refrain from fighting if fighting was prescribed for you?' They said, 'And why should we not fight in the cause of Allah when we have been driven out from our homes and from our children?' But when fighting was prescribed for them, they turned away, except for a few of them. And Allah is knowing of the wrongdoers. And their prophet said to them, 'Indeed, Allah has sent to you Saul as a king.' They said, 'How can he have kingship over us while we are more worthy of kingship than him, and he has not been given any measure of wealth?' He said, 'Indeed, Allah has chosen him over you and has increased him abundantly in knowledge and stature. And Allah gives his sovereignty to whom he wills. And Allah is all-encompassing in favor and knowing.' And their prophet said to them, 'Indeed, a sign of his kingship is that the chest will come to you, in which is assurance from your Lord and a remnant of what the family of Moses and the family of Aaron had left, carried by the angels. Indeed, in that is a sign for you, if you are believers." End quote. The prophet the Quran refers to is Samuel. The Quranic narrative is basically that the Israelites tell Saul to send them a king, and from the Bible we know that this request is so that the Israelites can be like all other nations and have their king fight their battles for them. The Quran tells us that Samuel responds by telling the Israelites that Saul has been sent to them as their king. But the Israelites refuse to recognize him as such for the listed reasons. Samuel then responds that a sign of his kingship is that he has possession of the Ark of the Covenant. On that basis, the Israelites are to recognize Saul as king. Now, this point is very important. According to the Quran, Saul having possession of the Ark of the Covenant is an indication of his kingship, and it's because of this that the Israelites are to fight their enemies, the Philistines. But there's a problem with the Quranic narrative. This is how the biblical narrative unfolds in the book of 1 Samuel. The Ark of the Covenant is in the sanctuary at Shiloh. The Philistines defeat the Israelites in battle. The Israelites have the priests bring the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh to their camp so that God will assist them the next time they fight the Philistines. The Israelites are not scared to fight and are quite confident now that the Ark of the Covenant is with them. It is actually the Philistines who are scared. Quote, "And when the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel shouted so loudly that the earth shook. Now when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, 'What does the sound of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews mean?' Then they understood that the Ark of the Lord had come into the camp. So the Philistines were afraid, for they said, 'God has come into the camp.' And they said, 'Woe to us, for such a thing has never happened before. Woe to us! Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness. Be strong and conduct yourselves like men, you Philistines, that you do not become servants of the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Conduct yourselves like men and fight." End quote. However, the Israelites lose this battle as well, and the Ark of the Covenant is captured by the Philistines. The Ark of the Covenant then brings plagues to the Philistines, forcing the Philistines to send the Ark of the Covenant back to the Israelites. The Ark of the Covenant comes to rest at Kiryat Yearim until King David brings it back to Jerusalem. Saul is appointed king. Now, the appointment of Saul as king is found in 1 Samuel chapter 10, verses 24 through 27. Quote, "And Samuel said to all the people, 'Do you see him whom the Lord has chosen, that there is no one like him among all the people?' So all the people shouted and said, 'Long live the king!' Then Samuel explained to the people the behavior of royalty, and wrote it in a book and laid it up before the Lord. And Samuel sent all the people away, every man to his house. And Saul also went home to Gibeah. And valiant men went with him, whose hearts God had touched. But some rebels said, 'How can this man save us?' So they despised him and brought him no presents, but he held his peace." End quote. Contrary to the Quranic narrative, 1. The overwhelming majority of Israelites accepted Saul as king upon Samuel's proclamation. It is only an insignificant number of rebels who did not accept him as king. And 2. The accepting of Saul's kingship was not in the context of battle and the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Quran really messes up the story of Saul when we read 1 Samuel chapter 13, verses 4 through 7, and chapter 14, verses 15 through 23. The Quran is referring to the battle at Michmash. Quote, "Now all Israel heard it said that Saul had attacked the garrison of the Philistines, and that Israel had also become an abomination to the Philistines. And the people were called together to Saul at Gilgal. Then the Philistines gathered together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. And they came up and encamped in Michmash, to the east of Beth-aven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in danger, for the people were distressed, then the people hid in caves, in thickets, in rocks, in holes, and in pits. And some of the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. As for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. And there was trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. The garrison and the raiders also trembled, and the earth quaked, so that it was a very great trembling. Now the watchmen of Saul and Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and there was the multitude melting away, and they went here and there. Then Saul said to the people who were with him, 'Now call the roll and see who has gone from us.' And when they had called the roll, surprisingly, Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not there. And Saul said to Ahijah, 'Bring the ark of God here,' for at that time the ark of God was with the children of Israel. Now it happened, while Saul talked to the priest, that the noise which was in the camp of the Philistines continued to increase. So Saul said to the priest, 'Withdraw your hand.' Then Saul and all the people who were with him assembled, and they went to the battle. And indeed every man's sword was against his neighbor, and there was very great confusion. Moreover, the Hebrews who were with the Philistines before that time, who went up with them into the camp from the surrounding country, they also joined the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. Likewise, all the men of Israel who had hidden in the mountains of Ephraim, when they heard that the Philistines fled, they also followed hard after them in the battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle shifted to Beth-aven." End quote. So reading this, apart from the historical inaccuracy the Quran makes with regards to how the Israelites came to recognize Saul as king, the Quran makes it seem that the bringing of the Ark of the Covenant is what would embolden the Israelites to fight the Philistines under Saul's kingship. The only problem is, the above narrative is from the corrupted Hebrew Masoretic text and any translations based on it, for example the Old Testament Sirach Pshita. The Hebrew Masoretic texts of the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel are noticeably corrupt given the comparison with the Dead Sea Scrolls, which align with the Septuagint Greek. Specifically, the problem is mention of the Ark. The Septuagint, which is a much more faithful preservation of the original, has ephod. And Saul said to Ahijah, "Bring the ephod here." This makes sense because the priest was standing right beside Saul. But what is an ephod? It is a highly important priestly garment. In addition to priests wearing the ephod, the prophet Samuel wore one, and also King David when he carried the Ark of the Covenant back into Jerusalem. In the context of Saul, think of it as a battle flag that the entire camp of Israelites can see and understand that this battle is one of dedication to God, that it is the Israelites' obedience to the proper liturgical and sacrificial worship of God, the keeping of his commandments as given to them by Moses, that grants victory. To summarize, Saul is accepted as king following the prophet Samuel's proclamation, contrary to the Quran's portrayal that it is in the context of battle that Saul is accepted as king. Minus an insignificant number of rebels, Saul is universally accepted as king following the prophet Samuel's proclamation, contrary to the Quran's portrayal that most people initially rejected Saul as king. Saul calls for the ephod to be brought to battle, contrary to the Quran's portrayal, based on the corrupted Masoretic text, that it is the Ark of the Covenant that Saul has brought to battle. But even if we go with the corrupted Masoretic reading that Saul had the Ark of the Covenant brought during the battle at Michmash, it still does not support the Quranic narrative that it was for the purpose of the Israelites accepting Saul as king. The Quranic narrative is just flat out wrong and has no historical basis. It betrays only a superficial familiarity with prior scripture. Quite literally, the only argument Muslims can make at this point, and it's a laughable argument, is that the Quran is quote-unquote correcting history. Let's remind everyone what the Quran says. So if you are in doubt, O Muhammad, about that which we have revealed to you, then ask those who have been reading the scripture before you. The truth has certainly come to you from your Lord, so never be among the doubters. And let the people of the gospel judge by what Allah has revealed therein. And whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, then it is those who are the defiantly disobedient. So when we as Christians do exactly as the Quran suggests, use our scripture to evaluate the truthfulness of Muhammad's prophetic claim, we conclude that Muhammad was a fraud.